Are you aware of how your social media and internet use are affecting your sleep?
Besides the negative effect this may be having on your mental health, is it also affecting your walk with Jesus?
How did Jesus think about sleep? And what does it have to do with learning to think like Jesus?
These are some of the questions we'll be tackling today on the Prepared to Answer podcast.
You're listening to the Prepared to Answer podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And just a reminder that all the resources mentioned in this episode are linked in the episode description. You can find other related resources on our website at preparedtoanswer.org.
Welcome to the Prepared to Answer podcast. My name is Shawn Walker, and as always, I'm with Scott Steen. How are you, Scott?
I'm feeling very alert.
You are?
Shawn, very alert and awake.
I am feeling a little sleepy today. I'm going to be honest.
Well, that's a great segue then into our discussion today
on sleeping.
Sleep deprivation, right?
Yes. And we're actually going to get into the theology of sleep eventually. But though I wanted to mention to any of our listeners, maybe we have some new listeners that have joined Prepared to Answer and kind of what we do and what I've been enjoying over this last little while is we've been looking at mental health. Mm-hmm. But we always ask the question, how would Jesus think about a subject?
Right. That's our project.
Yes.
Prepared to Answer. We want to learn how to think in the manner of Jesus about all things.
Yes.
In particular, we want to talk about the things that are especially relevant for our listeners, for, this generation, who seek to live out faithfulness to Christ in what is often a very difficult world.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. And so we've been looking at mental health, but then we've started looking at a digital age and the impact on mental health. And so in our last episode, we were looking at, was the right term social isolation?
Social deprivation.
Deprivation.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, we looked at, this is all coming out of An Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. That's a fantastic book, very informative.
Yeah.
Not a Christian book, but just based on some really relevant and important research. I think just demonstrating the impact of our digital age on us. And he pointed out the four costs of living life online. And last week we looked at the price of social deprivation.
Yeah.
That there is this misnomer, even in the term social media,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's actually an isolating form of engagement.
Yeah.
It's good for communication, information exchange, sure, but it cannot replace, and it doesn't replace, the real embodied social community needs that we have as human beings, the way God's made us.
Yeah. And so we asked the question, how would Jesus think about that?
Yeah.
And so we invite our listeners, if you hadn't listened to that episode, love for you to go back, listen to that, share it with others as well. We really encourage you to do that. So, but the second part of Haidt's description of opportunity cost was
sleep deprivation.
So essentially he's saying that the phone, social media, is causing sleep deprivation amongst our younger generation. Is that what he's finding?
Yes. I mean, now what he's saying, he's looking at the research.
Okay.
Right. And this is gobs and gobs of studies being done. And the phone certainly, social media, yes, but more broadly, they talk about internet addiction. So it doesn't have to just be the phone. But yeah, and again, we looked at a number of reports, a number of studies done, and looking at the changes, particularly among teens. And there's this window of time between 2010 to 2015, 16 that they see as that it's kind of like the real advent of the cell phone in the hands of every teen. Sure. Right? The smartphone, rather.
And we're saying that's in conjunction with social media and use of the internet. We're kind of equating the two.
Right. It's kind of seen as when it became mainstream.
Yeah.
And you just see the data, you just see the graphs, this sharp incline, right, during that era of change. And it's because of the change that brought about by doing life on our phones, so much of it, especially for our young people who are their brains are still developing. They're in the developmental stage, and it's having a real impact.
So what would be the impact then to sleep deprivation? Are they finding some impact?
Well, one of the realities, and this is something I came across at the sleepfoundation.org. It's an organization that studies sleep.
Okay.
Probably sponsored by mattress companies or something like that. I don't know. They kind of show this negative feedback loop that can worsen sleep and mental health. It also almost becomes self-perpetuating.
Okay.
Because they talked about how, when you are stressed and worried, that leads to this decline in mental health. right? And we talked about anxiety and those kinds of things last couple times. But then declining mental health can have an impact on sleep. It can lead to things like insomnia or poor sleep rhythms. Your body doesn't get into the deep kind of sleep that you need, which they show then leads to feelings of fatigue. You don't get the rest you need. You know your body needs it. Your brain needs it, which then leads to difficulty in focusing. Mm-hmm. Like you can't concentrate. You can't think, which just creates stress and worry. Right?
Sure.
Anyway, it's this cycle. That was interesting, but what I really found interesting, I actually did a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the more scholarly research. And there was a study done on internet addictions and sleep problems that was done in around 2022 by a group of sleep researchers. They did a study of all the leading research over the last decade or so. Here's one of the things they found from all the research kind of that they piled together. See, the results of various studies have indicated a relationship between pathological internet use and sleep disturbances, such as, and here are some of the relationships, an excessive online behavior reducing sleep time. You can understand
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
We spend so much time online, we're into the night, doom scrolling and all the rest.
Yeah.
Tendencies then to sleep late, sleep disorders, insomnia, increased fatigue, and drowsiness during the day. In addition, they said exposure to bright light has been associated with the suppression of melatonin secretion, that chemical that helps your body get to a state of sleep.
Yeah.
And delayed sleep and wakefulness, which can increase consciousness and sleep disturbance. They went on to say that the excessive use of social media and internet plays an important role in initiating and increasing sleep disturbances, particularly with the younger community, which I found interesting. They said the individuals most susceptible to internet addiction appear to be children, teenagers, and young adults, which is fascinating, which they say, and this is a highly vulnerable segment of the population because most of them are still in their developing stages.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's this perfect storm for our young people putting a phone in their hands. And again, last time we talked about we're not for banishing the cell phone, but we have to acknowledge there's some real social costs.
Sure. So I think it's pretty obvious that phones are affecting sleep.
It is, all of the research
sure.
points to that. All of it does.
Yeah. And sleep is, or lack of sleep is detrimental to our health. I think we would all agree with that.
I just think we know that intuitively.
Sure. But what I'd like to, challenge our listeners or at least talk about is move to the notion that, at least in my perception, that sleep is kind of a bad thing, that, that we emulate people that don't sleep a lot. Our culture, our society almost celebrates those that don't need sleep. And I've looked this up and I know I've heard it before, great leaders say, all I need is 4 or 5 hours of sleep. In fact, I looked it up and actually the last few presidents would all claim that they don't need a lot of sleep to function. In fact, Bill Clinton talked about one of his college profs saying, a trait of a great man is the fact that he doesn't need to sleep.
Yeah.
Right? And so we've got these kids on their phones and we're like, oh, you need to sleep. And they could easily point to someone like that and say, well, listen, they don't need to sleep. I don't need to sleep.
Yeah, I guess you know what? I get that. In fact, as you say that, in my mind, I remembering back to, even in my early days in seminary, I remember in church history, we're learning about some of the spiritual greats of the Christian faith, people like, William Carey and George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards, these great men of faith, and how their memoirs or their journals, they talk about how they would get up at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. to study scripture and pray before they would begin their day. And that almost became for, us as young seminarians. It's like, oh, that's how I'm going to be a great man of God, is I need to start getting up before the crack of dawn, hours, and just spend time. And, I'm probably not the only one. I remember trying that a few times. I just couldn't do it. I just was not, I couldn't manage that.
Yeah.
So maybe part of the challenge is we know the importance of sleep, and yet, as you're right, our young people, they might be hearing us talking out of both sides of our mouths as a culture saying, look, you need to get more sleep. But there seems to be this elevation in the mind of our culture, people who rob themselves of sleep in order to accomplish great things. Yeah, so, here we're telling our kids they need more sleep. But we've got these examples in our culture, even in the church of, no, you know what, going without sleep for the sake of doing great things. You know what, I think we have to look a little close, probably more closely at that. I'm not sure great presidents can function on 4 hours of sleep indefinitely. Maybe for periods of time where there's,
crisis or something.
Crisis.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just really high capacity people. But even these spiritual greats I was talking about, they got up at 4 a.m. But I mean,
maybe they went to bed at 8.
Oh, well, they must have. I mean, this is the 1700s.
What's happening?
The sun goes down. I mean, in October, November, like yesterday, it got dark at 4:30 in the afternoon here in Canada. So it's not like they were up till midnight, binge watching Netflix. So getting up at 4 is no deal if you go to bed at 8.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we need to just be careful of not maybe creating these ideals that maybe are superhuman, but maybe not realistic, before we just go saying, hey, there's examples of you don't need sleep in order, you can do great things without it.
Yeah. And speaking of great things, who in the history of this planet has done greater things than Christ? Yeah. And so what a great opportunity to ask the question, what would Jesus think about sleep?
And I think that's worth diving into. And I want to go there. That's why I want to spend most of our time talking today.
Yeah.
We don't have to spend a lot of time making the case that, internet, blue light on your, late nights, doom scrolling, all of that stuff is going to rob you of sleep to your detriment.
Yeah.
But what does Jesus think about sleep?
Is there more to sleep than the physical aspect?
Well, here's the thing is I think we could make the case practically that it's going to have a negative impact on you.
If you don't get sleep.
Your health, your grades, your focus, your concentration. But I think Christians, particularly Christian young people, might be willing to say, yeah, that might be the case, but I'm willing to trade off a little bit of...
Sure.
But I think Jesus has something to say about that.
Apart from the practical, apart from the physical?
Yeah, I think there's something. I think about the example of Jesus in Mark 4. And actually, this story occurs in all the synoptics, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But it's where Jesus calms the storm.
Then he's sleeping.
Mark 4, Mark records, that the disciples, they left with Jesus in a boat after a long season of ministry. They went out into the lake, and then the sunstorm swoops down on them and starts buffeting them, and the disciples are afraid that they're going to drown. And Mark includes this one little line. Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. Right?
Yeah.
And then the disciples, terrified for their lives, go and wake him up. Jesus, we're going to drown. What are you going to do? And Jesus gets up and he just says, be still. And the storm stops, right? And he looks at his disciples and says, where's your faith? And I'm curious, why would Mark include a detail like that?
About the sleep, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. Because you've mentioned this before. Mark is a very concise gospel. There isn't any wasted words.
No, Mark is very deliberate.
Yeah.
In the details he chooses to include or not include in order to communicate his overall message of his gospel, of who Jesus is. Why would he include that?
Is that so that when we're in a crisis, we should go to sleep? Is that when we're on a boat?
Well, I don't think it was just happenstantial. I don't think that was just a throw off. I think there's something to that. Let's remember who Jesus was for a second. That Jesus is the Son of God incarnate. He is the perfect spirit-filled man.
Yeah.
So his life, therefore, was a perfect model of faith, of what it meant to live the perfect human life by faith in God, which means that even Jesus' thoughts about sleep and consequent behaviors were driven by his faith in his Father's love.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we have to, as Christians, learning to think like Jesus, we need to get past the idea that there are just some things in life that are, like the faith certainly involves, our worship and what we do on Sundays and our mission and devotion life and spirit. But there are some things that are just kind of, they're just mundane.
Sure. Yeah.
They don't have anything to do with spirituality. And I would put to you, there was nothing that Jesus ever thought about that did not fall within the purview of his understanding that he was his Father's son and that life was meant for his Father's glory. And I think we need to get past the idea that something like sleep is merely a practical means to an end.
So that there's a spiritual aspect to sleep?
There is. And I think we could talk about a theology of sleep.
Wow.
That actually, Paul says this, right? Whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, and I think he could have asked, sleep, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Does
Yeah.
that mean sleep also can glorify God? And I think the answer is yes.
Okay. There's a spiritual aspect to sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, listen to this. Here's Proverbs speaking, Solomon speaking in Proverbs 3. My son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet, for the Lord will be at your side and keep your foot from being snared. There's this connection in Proverbs to living by wisdom and enjoying sweet sleep.
Okay.
And here's the reason, because the Lord will be at your side. I think there is something instructive here. And the more I started thinking about it, how is sleep connected to wisdom, biblical, godly wisdom? What's the connection, right? We're trying to get at the argument that sleep's not just something we do.
Yeah.
It's not just towards a practical outcome.
Sure. Yeah.
That there's a spiritual element. And what's the connection between sleep and wisdom then? Here's Proverbs 9, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Right.
Okay, let's anchor biblical wisdom where it begins.
Yeah.
To be wise is to walk in the reverence of God as the starting point for every thought you have. That sounds familiar, right?
Yeah.
That's learning to think like Jesus,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
This necessarily means that there are no spiritually neutral areas of our lives. That's what biblical wisdom tells us.
Sure.
There's no neutral territory. It's all spiritual, right?
Interesting.
Everything we do, if it's done in wisdom, is done with God in mind. And so where does sleep fit into this? This is the question I'm kind of,
Sure.
Okay, Jesus, how would he think about sleep? Since every thought he had flowed from his love for the Father, everything was about God,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
How does sleep reinforce reverence for God? What's the connection with wisdom? And I did a little looking, and there's two Psalms that jumped out at me, Psalm 3 and Psalm 4. And I think the Psalms are especially instructive, Shawn, because David, who wrote these Psalms, he was an anointed one. He was God's anointed king. He was a Christ type, if you will, of God's chosen one, of which Jesus was the ultimate. Jesus was the Messiah, right? And so you could put these words into the mouth of Jesus. And so here's Psalm 3, 5-6. The psalmist speaking, this is David. I lie down and sleep, and I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. And as I was reading this one, Psalm 4, verse 8, I was almost thinking of Jesus in the back of the boat.
Okay.
In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. I think Mark included that.
Because of that psalm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would make
I
sense.
can't prove it.
No.
But Jesus was sleeping in the most unlikely moment you would think. In a storm, a life-threatening storm in the back of a boat.
Right.
Jesus was sound asleep, peacefully sleeping.
Because of his faith in his
Because
Father.
Jesus trusted implicitly in his Father's love. There was not a moment he did not trust in his Father's love for him.
Yeah.
And so he slept the sleep of the peace-filled, right?
Which sounds wonderful.
Oh.
Yes.
So here's Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep.
Isn't that amazing? And in light of our conversations in previous episodes about anxiety, and here's Scripture talking to anxiousness and sleep.
So I think we've got some work to do here in making a bit of a connection for us in our digital age.
Okay.
But I think there's something here. It's vanity, the psalmist says, to toil restlessly, but rather to rest in the secure love and provision of our Father who gives sleep as a gift.
Yeah.
And I think there's something instructive in sleep in reminding us in a very bodily way that we are completely dependent. We can toil for nothing when we're sleeping.
Right.
Right.
Every night, everyone is brought to their knees.
Yeah.
In sleep.
But our problem, though, isn't here that we have a generation who's working so hard night and day that they're deprived of sleep.
No.
We're talking about internet addiction that robs us of sleep.
Right.
But I think that there's a parallel of anxious toil
Yeah.
So for the ancients, why would they toil day and night? For food.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
What need was that meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Their most basic needs, right? They're anxious that what they see as their most pressing need, they need to meet it. And so they're looking to their own hands to supply it in anxious toil.
So why is this generation doom scrolling away at night?
Exactly. That's my question. Why? What keeps us glued to these boxes in our hands?
Yeah.
Scrolling, always looking. Why can't we stop going to the next, to the next, to the next?
Maybe it's an escape.
What are we looking for?
Yeah. What are we trying to escape from, maybe?
Maybe we're trying to escape the anxious thoughts that are there when we're not distracted.
Yeah.
What are those anxious thoughts?
Right.
Well, those anxious thoughts evaporate when we live in the light of our Father's love.
Yeah.
And I think therein lies the theological significance of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
What's clear from Scripture is that it's a gift from God.
Yeah.
What's clear from Scripture is that it's a gift that is directly tied to our conscious dependence, that everything we need comes from the hand of God. I lay down at night, I put my head on the pillow, and I say, thank you, Lord, that you looked after me today.
Right.
And now I'm going to close my eyes and receive from you this gift of rest, which my body needs.
Yeah.
So I can get up tomorrow and live dependently on you again.
Yeah.
But it's God's gift. And what does it communicate, either consciously or unconsciously, when we refuse to do that, and instead we stay on our phones and we keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and distracting ourselves? I think there's something very spiritually significant to seeing sleep as a gift from God, and therefore taking the necessary steps to receive it.
Right.
And that means we got to turn these things off.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at my phone for those of you who are listening online.
And likewise, television, likewise, any other distraction that we might be trying to engage in to keep us from sleep, to try to escape what's happening. And just like we were talking about that vicious circle, what's that vicious circle? We're scrolling because we're anxious to be released from something, to escape from something, which is only going to cause us to be more anxious.
Right.
That's what Psalm 127 is saying, right? Anxious toil.
Right. And here we'll close with Psalm 121 because I think this is so key.
Yeah.
The solution is, listen to the psalmist in Psalm 121, I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel, that's God's people, will neither slumber or sleep. There's only one person who doesn't need sleep.
Right. And that's God.
And that's God.
And we're not God.
No, and we're not. And so we put our trust in the one who never sleeps. He doesn't sleep so he can look after us.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's a good place to end. I'm kind of tuckered out. I think I could.
You seem like you need some more sleep, Shawn.
I do.
You need the gift of sleep.
I do need the gift of sleep. Yes, I do. Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you on any of the platforms you can find us on, or you can email us at info@preparedtoanswer.org. And until next time, God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Prepared to Answer podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share with us, feel free to email us at info@preparedtoanswer.org, contact us through Facebook or Instagram @preparedtoanswer, or use the contact form on our website, preparedtoanswer.org.